Hey friends, my name is Steve Guttenberg and I am the Audiophiliac, and today I'm going to talk about Bob Dylan. I mean, what can I say? I actually have a few things to say about Bob Dylan, but the thing about Bob Dylan is his voice. I mean, that is the first thing. When he made his first record, this one, the young Bob Dylan, he's like 20 years old. It came out in 1962, and it didn't have original. It had one or two original Bob Dylan songs on it. But he did a lot of covers, including "House of the Rising Sun." He did it before the Animals or those other people covered it. But it was a traditional song, and supposedly he used another folk singer, Dave Van Ronk's arrangement for "House of the Rising Sun." But he's the unformed Bob Dylan, and his voice is not a conventional voice. And John Hammond, the guy who brought him to the label, Columbia Records, I can't imagine the crap that the other Columbia executives put on Mr. Hammond for bringing this kid in with such a weird, unconventional voice that a lot of people find unpleasant. But he was really a songwriter. He was writing songs, and the songs were being covered by the Byrds, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and they're having hits with it. And Dylan is first and foremost a songwriter. And not just in the early days. I think he always was, and I think he always saw himself that way. Matter of fact, I have this interview of him in 2006 in Italy, where it's a pretty boring interview, and then suddenly it goes off the rails, and he starts talking about how much he hates the sound of his own records, and that other people who cover his music do it so much better than he does. And it's pretty remarkable, actually, that he can't get it done in the way he wants it to. I mean, when he made this record called Modern Times, and I wrote an As We See It for Stereophile about Modern Times, because Dylan, when that record came out, which is, I don't know, like 2010 or so, or 2011, something like that, a while ago, he was interviewed in Rolling Stone magazine, and he said in the course of the interview that modern music, including his own, sounds atrocious. That was the word he used. And that really stuck out at me, and I said, I'm going to use that to write this as the Stereophile As We See It, because I agree with Bob Dylan. A lot of modern music sounds atrocious, and his record in particular, Modern Time, definitely sounds atrocious. So Bob and I are on the same page. And as I was working on putting this piece together, I looked around, and somehow I stumbled upon this interview with Bob Dylan with Playboy magazine, of all places. And the interviewer asked him a question that was a good question, but the answer really stuck out. The question was, what is your best sounding record? And Bob Dylan answered, this interview is in the 80s, and Bob Dylan's answer was Blonde on Blonde. But more than just saying that he thought it was his best sounding record, he said why it was his best sounding record, and the answer was because it captured the sound that was in his head. More of what was in his head wound up on the final product that everybody could hear than any other record. And he called it like quick mercury sound. It had this energy of the time of, I guess that's 67 or 68 when that record came out, and it had the energy that he wanted it to have in the right way of communicating the music and the words in exactly the way Bob Dylan wanted. But that was a really long time ago, then, and even longer ago now, that Dylan can't make records that sound the way he wants them to sound. It's a common theme that runs through his work, and that is sad, because Bob Dylan, certainly as the decades rolled on, could have had anything he wanted when it comes to making records. Any producer, any studio, analog, digital, any band, he could have it. And if he made a record he didn't think came out right, he could make it the same record, record it over again with different band, different producer, different engineer. Whatever Bob Dylan wants, Bob Dylan can get. No one's going to say no to Bob Dylan, so it seems. So it's him. He can't make records. He can't articulate to a producer, to an engineer, or to the band what he wants them to do. He is a singular artist. Let's put it that way. Maybe that's it. Anyway, I think, the early records like this one, Another Side of Bob Dylan, there was something about his words, his craft on those really early records, when it's mostly just him on guitar. And I didn't like them for years. They were not my favorite records. As a matter of fact, that first one I showed you, this one, I never played this record all the way through until a couple of weeks ago at this point. And I sat through the whole thing, and I really liked the record. But it was something about it that used to irritate me. I never listened to it before. But Bob Dylan's craft and his brain power was really impressive. There's this one Dylan song called Bob Dylan's Dream. There's many Bob Dylan's Dream, but the first one, just Bob Dylan's Dream, it's from the perspective of an old man looking back on his youth, saying, oh, if I could only get back together with my friends when the world was perfect then, it was us against them, and we thought we'd remain friends and tight forever. And now that I'm old, oh, how I wish I could go back to that space and that time and be with you. I would give anything. And he was 22 years old when he wrote it, so he saw the future perfectly, actually. Anyway, just a few random thoughts about the Zimmerman, Bob Dylan himself. He's made a lot of great records, a lot of really, really bad records, but the great ones are really great. Oh, by the way, the other thing I want to say is this record, which is definitely an early record now, Nashville Skyline. Bob Dylan's voice changed all the time. This record is his deep baritone voice, and when it came out, when I heard it on the radio for the first time, I didn't know it was Bob Dylan. They said, we're going to play the new Bob Dylan record, Nashville Skyline, and I thought, who is that guy? I think they're playing the wrong record. Because before that, it was the Bob Dylan voice, and now we got this, lay guy, and he kept doing that. He kept changing his voice over time. A lot of Bob Dylan voice, a lot of Bob Dylans, so it seems. Anyway, let's hear your thoughts about the Bob Dylan man himself in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching. This is the Audiophiliac Daily Show, comes up daily. Hope to see you again here really, really soon.